I want to ask you about these tariffs. A lot of talk about trade and the president's tariffs initiative on steel and aluminum. The EU is threatening to retaliate. What do you make of that?
Well, look, to have a trade war, you've got to have various combatants, right? The Europeans are not stupid. What they've decided to do is threaten tariffs on 3 industries that are very politically sensitive in the United States. They threatened to put tariffs on Harley-Davidson, which is in Paul Ryan's home district, on Levi's, which is Nancy Pelosi's home district, and on Bourbon, which is Mitch McConnell's home district. So the Europeans are signaling that they're ready to play ball on this. Look, President Trump has said trade wars are winnable, and in the absolute narrowest sense, that's true. You can win a trade war if your narrow objective is to protect one very small sector of the economy. But the question that we have to ask, and which everyone is asking, is at what cost to other sectors of the economy, to relationships with the U.S. allies, right? Most of the major steel exporters to the U.S. are actually friends. It's not China, it's Canada, it's Brazil, it's the Europeans, it's South Korea. So there's a question of at what cost President Trump is willing to protect this very small industry, and if the rest of the country, and indeed the world, is willing to bear that cost without responding.
And the president has said that, you know, this could be a potential way to negotiate using the tariff issue on NAFTA, with negotiating with Mexico and with Canada. We've seen pushback from Canada, top officials coming forward saying that, you know, no, that's not how it's going to happen. What do you make of this?
Well, NAFTA, I mean, Canada is the largest single steel exporter to the U.S., and they're involved in NAFTA, but the other 9 in that top 10 are not, right? So, so you can, what President Trump has tried to do is link the steel tariff issue to NAFTA. NAFTA is already wildly complex and under a very tight time pressure. The NAFTA agreements really have to be reached before the Mexicans go in for presidential elections in July, and then of course the midterms in the U.S. in November. So there's already very compressed time schedule. The Canadians don't seem to be much impressed by President Trump's threats to include the steel tariffs as part of the negotiation. I think in the bigger picture it just complicates an already wildly complicated negotiation that probably wasn't going to get done before July anyway.
Yeah, and you got elections in Mexico too. Interesting to see how this impacts that. You know, President Trump has said that this entire tariff agreement is targeting China in particular. Where you looked at a country like China where they've actually decreased, I mean, they still are great steel, aluminum producers, but they've decreased over the past few months their output. Does this really hurt China? How does this affect our relationship with them?
Well, the Chinese are barely in the top 10 among steel exporters to the United States. From the Chinese perspective, I have to imagine that Beijing is perfectly happy to see the U.S. and the Europeans at each other's throats over trade issues rather than dealing with Washington coming to Beijing on trade issues. So this measure in particular has very little effect on the Chinese.